Trump's intensifying retribution campaign against a list of targets that continues to grow. Listen to this, y'all. Reuters reports that at least 470 targets, 470, have faced retaliation under the president's leadership. While some of those efforts have been derailed, like the dismissal of criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, that's not stopping the president from going on the warpath to punish his perceived political enemies. This week, Trump's DOJ and FBI began investigating the 6 Democratic lawmakers he accused of, quote, seditious behavior after they urged military personnel to refuse illegal orders. The Pentagon is also investigating whether Senator Mark Kelly, a former Navy pilot, breached military law by participating in the lawmakers' message to service members. Despite the investigation against him, Senator Kelly is making it clear he's not backing down. Here's what he told Jimmy Kimmel this week.
He's trying to get some fear out there. And fear can be contagious. But what also can be contagious is courage and patriotism. Every one of us has First Amendment speech rights. And I think the president is infringing on those. And he is sending a pretty strong message. You do not want to cross him, and your loyalty should be to him. It should not. It should always be to the Constitution.
We've got a clapping over here. Meanwhile, Trump is once again going after his predecessor, announcing on social media that he's canceling all executive orders signed by Joe Biden using an auto pen. Among other things, Trump could potentially try to reverse pardons issued by President Biden, but legal experts point out there is no mechanism to undo clemency after it is granted. Joining us now, conservative lawyer George Conway. He's also president of Society for the Rule of Law and political magazine senior writer Ankush Khardori. He's also a former federal prosecutor. I want to start where I ended, which is President Trump saying that he's going every executive order and apparently pardon anything signed with the auto pen by Joe Biden, he's declaring gone. Executive orders are one thing, right? This is why, folks say executive orders are not the way you want to govern, because they can go away every time there's a new president in office. But please remind the people there is no legal avenue to get rid of pardons in this country.
There is no legal
from
avenue
a president
to get rid of pardons. By the way, the whole thing is sort of bizarre. There's no legal requirement that the pardons even be signed by the president. So whether there's an auto pen or not is beside the point. It's apparently consuming Trump's mind for much of his presidency, because he did the whole thing where he put the auto pen on the White House wall and everything. But no, this is just appears to be sort of more nonsense.
But if we saw Trump decide, or the Justice Department decide to prosecute someone who Joe Biden had pardoned, what would be the backstop there?
They would assert, the defendant would assert the pardon as the defense in the proceeding.
And the case would be dismissed.
Really quickly, I want to read, though, the pardon clause in the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. The president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. That's all it says. It doesn't say it has to be signed, like you said. It doesn't say that anything else has to happen. And the president say, I grant you a pardon, go free kid.
Not only that, I mean, it doesn't have to be signed, but there is well-established Justice Department legal advice that says that basically the president can sign things however he wants. He can want to use a thumbprint, he can use a thumbprint. If he wants to use someone else to sign for him, he can do that. If he wants to use a machine or a stamp, he can do that. And there's nothing illegal about those pardons. And they will be successfully invoked by defendants in court. Now, executive orders are a different thing, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they were signed. Trump can just undo executive orders. He can just say, I'm undoing all Sleepy Joe's execuct orders, regardless of whether they signed by an auto pen. And so be it. That's what he's entitled to do that.
Well, to your point, George, factcheck.org put something out. This was March of this year. Trump's baseless auto pen claims about Biden's pardons. Legal experts say there is nothing to President Donald Trump's claim that several of former President Joe Biden's pardons are void because they were signed via auto pen. White House lawyers during the George W. Bush administration said the use of an auto pen is perfectly legal, and constitutional scholars say that nothing in the Constitution even requires pardons to be signed anyway, as has been brought up 3 times at this table. Go ahead, Ankush.
One other thing. I mean, there's only one person who's ever admitted live on camera that he did not know who the person was who he
who was
pardoned.
that?
Oh, yeah, who was that?
That is Donald Trump, right?
Really?
Regarding Changpeng Zhao, the head of Binance, who was pardoned, I don't remember, a couple months ago.
Right.
He was asked about it. He said he didn't know who that was. That, to me, is way more significant. It's either true that he doesn't know who it was and some staff member put him up to it, or he's lying.
And both are terrible. But
Correct.
That's just me.
And they're both are
It's like we've seen this movie before. Either he's telling the truth, which is awful, or he's lying.
Which is bad.
An
We don't want
ongoing
presidents to
theme
lie.
here.
Yeah.
Can we get to the Venezuela of it all? The Washington Post, we went through this article earlier, but just to remind our viewers, has this very damning article about the Defense Department's orders to kill 2 people who were on a boat off of Venezuelan waters, off of the Venezuelan coast, who were not killed in an initial drone strike. It's almost like Mark Kelly and the rest of those Democratic senators actually might have known what they were talking about, or potentially already knew about this report coming out. But there are former military lawyers, people who have actually advised special operations forces in the past, who believe that this order amounts to a war crime, which is that they called it in order to show no quarter.
It actually isn't a war crime because there is no war. It's worse than a war crime because, first of all, the bombings in the first place were illegal because there is no war,
Right.
and these were not combatants. But even if these
We don't know who they are. We still, to this day, do not know
Okay,
who these people
they
are.
weren't, they weren't naval.
Yeah,
it wasn't a
yeah.
naval vessel. It wasn't. There is no war between us and Venezuela, and these people were not sailors or soldiers fighting with weapons against us. So that the law of war doesn't even. You don't even get to the law of war. But even if it were,
Right.
even if these guys were a naval ship armed to the teeth, and the ship was blown up, and these guys were in the water, firing against them would be an act, would be a violation of the laws of war.
How likely
but no matter
is it?
how you look at this, you can apply civilian law, military law, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, international law, foreign law, domestic law, federal law, state law. No matter what legal regime you apply to the second strike, it's murder. Period. It's not even. There's not even an argument. That's how outrageous this is.
George, you named a lot of laws there just a moment ago.
No matter
All
what
of
the
them.
legal
Right.
framework is, it's murder.
Right. And so I want to switch gears just a tiny bit because the President of the United States is awake. And about less than a half hour
That's
ago.
reassuring.
Wait, no, George, you probably don't know this. Listen, here it is. To all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Okay, Ankush? He is the president of the United States, not Venezuela. So does he have the legal authority to declare another nation's airspace off limits?
By Truth Social.
Right.
No, he doesn't. I actually think it's a little bit worse than that. If what he is saying is true and it's not walked back, and he intends to follow through on his message there, he's saying that our country is about to launch an illegal war.
Right. We're going to call it the war on Epstein.
How likely is it that a next administration, a potentially Democratic administration, would actually prosecute the people carrying out these orders?
Okay, so this is a very, very interesting and important question.
Yeah.
Trump can eliminate everyone's liability if he pardons everyone out the door, okay? Right? If he pardons everyone who's involved in these strikes, he can eliminate their liability under federal law. If he does not issue a pardon, then I think a lot of people are going to be pointing to OLC guidance that supposedly supports these strikes.
This is the classified memo that says
Correct.
that these folks won't face any kind of.
Exactly, which, so far as I can tell, is completely baseless as a legal analytic matter. That memo might help people lower down the food chain. I don't see how it can help the people at the very top, based on the reporting that the legal advice itself has been gamed by the people in the Pentagon and the Department of Defense. You cannot invoke a legal opinion in your defense if you have orchestrated the opinion to work in your favor and to reach a predetermined conclusion. So that would be like the Hegseths of the world and the most senior military commanders. Last but not least, even if we're in that federal pardon scenario and nobody in the U.S. can do it, I think these people in office, particularly the most senior people, Hegseth and all, are really betting a lot that there will be no effort to enforce domestic laws by the South American countries whose citizens are being killed, or international law by international bodies. Those bets may be correct over the long haul, but those are real legal risks that these people are running.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
God.
When you look at, because in my intro I talked about Letitia James and I talked about Comey, their things getting thrown out, but 470 people and entities who are being attacked, you know, there's been a retribution by the president of the United States. We've never, and I know we talk about this a lot, but like never seen anything like this. And I think, you know, we knew there was a lot, but having the reporting that gives us a number that we're in month 10. What is it? Month 11, month 10 of this administration, and we're at 470 different iterations of retribution against his perceived political enemies or universities or whatever.
Yeah, Tricky Dick Nixon was a piker compared to this. I mean, we've never seen anything like it. The list is going to grow. And basically, it's anybody who he thinks crosses him or that his minions think cross him, because they will do this to please him. And then, you know, oddly, there's very much a focus on people who he thinks can't fight back or who thinks they won't fight back. He picks, you know, he's a bully. He picks targets that he thinks are most vulnerable, who are going to cave. And then sometimes there are people who he just leaves alone. But this is all designed not just to actually achieve retribution over these 470 and growing individuals. It's designed to intimidate others. And that's where it actually is the most effective, because, you know, a lot of these cases, like the Letitia James case and the Comey case, they've been thrown out. They have zero chance of ultimate success. But people don't want to tangle with that. They don't want to go through that process. They don't want to go through even an investigative process. And that is one of the ways that, you know, authoritarians like Trump try to suppress dissent.
I always go back to the Ed Martin of it all, where he said in front of a camera that at the end of the day, if we can't charge them or put them in jail, we're going to shame them. It's about the process of this, like you said.
Is there something incriminating in the file, sir? Why not quiet.
I'm joined now by April Ryan and Jim Acosta. April is the Washington bureau chief and White House correspondent for Black Press USA, as well as the host of The Tea with April Ryan on Substack, and now an MS Now contributor, as well as Jim Acosta, longtime White House correspondent and host of The Jim Acosta Show, available on Substack, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You know, Jim, it is not necessarily every day that you see someone try and defend the notion of piggy as a term of endearment. But here, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had an interesting defense of the quiet piggy comment made by the president. Let's listen to some of what she had to say.
Look, the president is very frank and honest with everyone in this room. You've all seen it yourself. You've all experienced it yourselves. The president being frank and open and honest to your faces rather than hiding behind your backs is frankly a lot more respectful than what you saw in the last administration, where you had a president who lied to your face and then didn't speak to you for weeks and hid upstairs and didn't take your questions. So I think everyone in this room should appreciate the frankness and the openness that you get from President Trump on a near daily basis.
Quiet piggy, frank, open, and honest. Jim, what do you make of the press secretary's response to the president's comments?
Well, let me be frank and honest, Charles. I think that the president, I mean, we've seen this for a long time now. April and I dealt with it when we were at the White House. I mean, when you're close to the target, you know, he starts to, go off on reporters. He'll call them all sorts of names and so on. But I think this is less about how he handles the press and more about how he deals with women. Imagine, the boss in your office talking to a female reporter in that way. It wouldn't be tolerated. That boss would be fired. At any company, that boss would be fired. And imagine if this were your daughter or your sister or your mother. being spoken to in this fashion. And that's why I strongly believe, and there are people who disagree with me on this, that other folks in the press in the room should speak up in that moment and say, Mr. President, that is not appropriate. And, and double down on the questions that were asked. Why didn't you answer that question? Why are you resorting to personal attacks? Why can't you take the heat? What's going on here? And, to me, I think the only solution to all of this is collective action. We need to see the networks get together, perhaps with some of the major newspapers, send a letter to the White House, send it to Caroline Leavitt, and say, listen, if the president does not stop these attacks, we're not coming into your Oval Office sprays. We're not going to ride with you on Air Force One. You can have Fox and all of these other sycophantic outlets covering you, but we're just not going to do it. We're going to take a break for a while until you clean up your act. That's what I think they should do.
Jim, you raise a very interesting point about the fact that many of these targets happen to be women. And we've seen how that has played out, not just with the press, but also with people like Letitia James, with people like Fani Willis, in terms of the manner in which she discusses them. But April, I want to talk to you about this longstanding history of attacking women, particularly in journalism. Back in 2011, New York Times contributor Gail Collins wrote about the insult that she received from Trump, saying, quote, "During one down period, I referred to him in print as a financially embattled thousandaire, and he sent me a copy of the column with my picture circled and the face of a dog written over it." In 2018, he insulted ABC News reporter Cecilia Vega unprompted. He said, quote, "You're not thinking, you never do." It certainly seems that there is a different type of vitriol that goes out toward women. Is that an easy read, or is there something deeper here?
I think it's something deeper, Charles. He objectifies women. If they're not appealing to his eyes or his senses, he wants to attack. And also, think about this. He sends these targeted negative attacks to people who I believe in his mind he thinks that are lesser. Women, as well as minorities. Let's put that extra layer on it. But here's the thing. The president has said this president has said this over and over again. He said it on some media reports that he tries to intimidate and discredit people because he doesn't want people believing what they say. The women that he's attacked have been very strong in reporting without fear or favor of this president, and he doesn't like it. He has attacked men to include our colleague Jim Acosta, but he does it more so on women. He's done it to me, and his minions will do it. I mean, from the press secretaries on down to other staffers. And that Piggy comment, Lynn Patton, who was then working at HUD, she's now at the White House, she called me Miss Piggy. So this is something that's been in their Trump style book for many years. So I report without fear or favor. And all of these women are reporting their truth, and the truth as we know it. And he wants to keep throwing these daggers at us to make the American public think that we're not right. But something's wrong here. You're seeing a constant drumbeat against women who are reporting the truth.
Now, April, I want to double click there. Is there a legitimate concern in your mind as a journalist that these personal insults, despite how distasteful and inappropriate they are from a professional standpoint, is there a concern that this will damage the credibility or delegitimize the press and their reporting in the minds of people who are sort of watching this play out?
Charles, it has done its damage. The word fake has already, we already had some distrust in the media. But for a president of the United States to have that bully pulpit, to have the largest megaphone to scream out fake, he has damaged the industry. And now in this second term, it is worse. There is a co-opting of media with this president, as well as we're seeing so many of our fellow journalists lose their jobs for giving facts and truth. And that's one thing that people are not talking enough about. This president has damaged the industry, and he has created a vacuum where those truth tellers and fact reporters are having trouble keeping jobs or finding jobs. So yes, there is damage by this president.
And speaking to that damage, Jim, the White House has just announced a new media bias page on its website. This bias page names a number of news outlets that it considers misleading or biased. What do you make of this, and how do you think it could potentially impact the business of news going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think April is exactly right. I've said this before on my show that I think Donald Trump has cracked the code in how to hurt the press in this country with these lawsuits that have been settled and so on. It's done terrible damage to the industry. I think by and large, when he puts that kind of stuff up on the White House website, what they're basically trying to do is just sort of feed red meat to the base. If you look at his poll numbers, he is down in the mid-30s right now, according to the latest public approval polls. I mean, that says to me that, he's about as popular as, basically the base and Republicans view him at this point. The rest of the country has sort of written him off. And the other thing that I think he does when he's lashing out in this fashion, and I will say, I think it's gotten worse. This is worse than what I saw during the first administration. In terms of the way he's ramping up these attacks. And it may have something to do with just a state of decline on his part. It seems to me to be kind of a symptom of the cognitive decline. If you saw what took place the other night on Thanksgiving night when he was lashing out at those reporters, he was lashing out at Somalia. He was talking about how Somalia is somehow a part of what took place when those Guard members got shot. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And so I do think to some extent he is lashing out in these moments because he just may be a bit lost and he doesn't know how to respond to some of these questions from these reporters. And so his gut instinct is to just fly off the handle.
Now, both of you all have platforms on independent sort of platforms. April, you have the T. Jim, you have the Jim Acosta Show. Is this something that we should expect from more journalists to see sort of independent arms extend out for more reporting on non-traditional platforms? And is that, Jim, a way of sort of ensuring your independence and being able to fight back against this attack on the press?
I think so. And April, I'm sure, has seen this frustration over the last couple of days. I have gotten so many messages on social media from people across the country who are absolutely outraged that members of the press are not standing up for one another when Trump goes out and attacks people like this. And it is part of the reason why, and what the folks do at MS Now is terrific, but it's part of the reason why there are so many Americans across the country who are saying, you know what, let's take a look at independent media. What's going on Substack? Let's see what's going on with YouTube. Let's see what's happening with April Ryan's show, The T. Brought to you by The Contrarian, the fine folks over there. And so the universe of media choices is expanding, I think, in part, Charles, because people are getting frustrated with what they are getting from, and forgive me for saying this, corporate media, legacy media, and so on, because I think they just want us to stand up for one another. They want us to stand up for decency. Charles, can you imagine, what are we going to do? Send millions of mini-me Donald Trumps into the workforce and have them verbally abuse their employees and their coworkers in this fashion? What are we doing to this country? This is not who we are. This is not America. We're decent. I think deep down we're decent people. And there's a little voice in all of us, whether you're Republican or Democrat, independent, that says, when he talks about reporters and calls them piggy and ugly, that's just wrong. And I don't want a country full of young men going into the workforce behaving like a little mini-me Donald Trump. It's just not right.
April, really quickly, I got about 30 seconds. Can you just talk very briefly about the importance of particularly black journalists in this moment and having the spaces to tell the stories that need to be told?
Let me say this. We are losing our jobs in a lot of these mainstream organizations. We are a part of the independent free press that the founding fathers put in place for checks and balances if checks and balances don't work in the three branches. And now, because we are that texture that gives that extra piece, we are losing our jobs, or we are being told to co-op. This is a critical crisis moment for black journalists in this golden era of Donald Trump, who has attacked us before and now attacking us again. And Charles, if they would have taken care of dealing with the situation when Jim, myself, Yamiche, and Abby Phillips were the target of his ire, we would not be here talking about this today.
New today, another House Republican is quitting Congress. Trump ally, Texas Representative Troy Nehls, says that he will not seek re-election and plans to retire at the end of this legislative session. It comes amid speculation that President Trump could be losing his tight grip on Capitol Hill's narrowing Republican majority. And joining me is our friend Hayes Brown, MS Now writer and editor and author of this opinion piece, Trump's chokehold on the House has some GOP members frustrated. Welcome. We've got a couple things to get to you about here, my friend, but here we go. Because there are several reports that a Republican mass exodus, right, from Congress, that it's really on the horizon there. From what you're hearing, is it likely, and is it something that would affect the balance of power in Congress? Because there'd be re-elections.
Yeah, right. I think it is. I think it's likely. It depends on the timing, how much it affects the balance of power. With Marjorie Taylor Greene exiting in January, her seat is a very solidly red Republican seat. When they do have a special election to fill it, it will be likely filled with a Republican. The question is, what happens if you have several members exiting at the same time and having that gap where before special election can be held, you have fewer Republicans sitting in the House. One of the biggest problems that the GOP has had since reclaiming the majority is how narrow that majority is. So if you have a lot of lawmakers who feel frustrated, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is, about how little can be done, or also the other lawmaker we've seen, Punchbowl News had an extended quote from one who they said was a senior lawmaker who feels like, what are we doing here if all we're going to be doing is voting on censures against each other or being potted plants?
I read that one.
It was a great quote that I think shows a deep, almost irony to me, though, given how happy you would expect Republicans to be in the House if they have the presidency and they're just getting to sit back and let Trump handle everything and just sort of rubber stamp. The fact that people there are saying, no, we want to work, at least enough to be reelected, and that they're not even getting that, is what's really interesting to me.
Well, it's interesting because you write some lawmakers are worried the White House's arrogance could cost them the House next year, if not sooner. Has this been a concern for a while? Did the MTG resignation only exacerbate the concerns?
I think the concern of the White House's arrogance have been there for a long time. You have an OMB director who says that we don't really need to follow appropriations laws. You have a White House that sort of doesn't even really bother going to Congress for most things at this point and just says we can do it on our own. So there's that feeling of sort of inability to actually get anything done. With Greene's exit, I think that opened the door to, if enough leave to deny Mike Johnson a majority, even temporarily, that would be chaotic and unprecedented in a way we haven't seen. Because what does happen if enough Republican lawmakers leave, that you do have a situation where we see with Kevin McCarthy, where the speaker is removed from power, and the Democrats are the ones with a technical majority enough to put Hakeem Jeffrey in the seat. What does that even look like? How does that work? And the fact that we're even considering it shows how sort of fragile the Republican majority really is.
Yet another unprecedented scenario. Let me ask you about the scathing Truth Social post in which the president wrote blasting a New York Times reporter, accusing him of showing signs of aging and fatigue. Let's go over some of the highlights. Here they go. He called the article a hit piece, said everything the New York Times writes about him is purposely negative, referred to the publication as an enemy of the people, and called the writer of that article a third-rate reporter who is ugly, both inside and out. I think it's pretty safe to say he was not very happy with that piece, right, and that reporter. But you say all this does is prove the point. How so?
I think that if you are pushing 80 and unwilling to admit, yes, I am aging, yes, I am slowing down, yes, some things may take me longer, but I'm doing it the best I can, that I think, and just pretending it's not happening, that is a hit to your credibility. I know that the mythos that he's putting out there, this aura of invincibility, that he is eternal, that he is so powerful, so strong, the utmost of masculinity. I know that that is what he puts out there to his base. That's the image he wants to project, and that aging undercuts that. So he wants to try to ignore it. But the problem is, aging is a reality.
Yeah.
I feel like in this country, especially, we fetishize youth, and aging is a taboo. And so in the emphasis of the former and vitality and strength, we want to not even look at the latter. So in trying to deny the fact that he is getting older, Trump is, I feel like, drawing more attention to those moments where it's obvious. Like, it's almost the Streisand effect, you know what I'm saying? Like, where in trying to deny a story and put something down, you're drawing more attention to it.
Okay. Well, let's just say you and I haven't seen each other in person for like a year, so I do not want to hear if I'm a year older than the last time I saw you. Anyway, thanks, Hayes. Good to see you.
Congress is set to return from the holiday break next week, and after Marjorie Taylor Greene's shocking resignation announcement, House Republicans are reportedly preparing for more to come. A senior House Republican told Punchbowl News this week, quote, "More explosive early resignations are coming. It's a tinderbox. Morale has never been lower. Mike Johnson will be stripped of his gavel, and they will lose the majority before this term is out." Even former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy agrees with this sentiment. During an appearance on Fox News this week, he issued a stern warning about the future of the Republican Party.
And I found Marjorie to be very effective, but she's almost like a canary in a coal mine. And this is something inside Congress they better wake up, because they're going to get a lot of people retiring, and they got to focus.
What he has to say is good. George Conway is back with us, along with Rena Shaw, geopolitical advisor and strategist and senior advisor for Our Republican Legacy. I'm George, you've been here. Hi. Rena, welcome. Welcome.
Hi.
George
Nice to
has
be
moved
here.
in. Chaos. George has moved in. So Rena, is the former House Speaker correct? Like, there's danger, Will Robinson. That's an old, dated reference. The old folks. So now you get it. You get it.
They did a remake.
Rena, is the former House Speaker correct? There's danger ahead for
I don't think
Speaker
there's
Johnson's caucus.
For Johnson, look, they've rallied around him really well for a while. I think his latest comments are a little tricky. I think the position he's been put in this fall, definitely he's in the hottest water he's been in. But I don't think he's fully in danger of losing the gavel. That's just because people know that, again, the chaos right before midterms will not bode well for the party. They've got a number of other issues, topmost being economy. Trump is in the tank on those approval numbers, in deep red places, coast to coast. So why would they want to get rid of another dear leader?
Well, but Rena, but I'm also thinking about the numbers. Now, you got a special election in Tennessee. Was it Tennessee, the 7th Congressional District, where Trump won it by double digits, but the Democrat, Afton Bain, she's within striking distance. When you factor in the margin of error, it's a tied race. She could win. So just in terms of numbers in the caucus, couldn't he lose his?
The numbers have always been dicey, though. This isn't different. I mean, the math is, of course, ever changing, but I don't really believe McCarthy. He didn't even see his own demise coming. I'm sorry. This is a guy that didn't really have foresight.
The reason
so let's not listen to
Jonathan
him.
was laughing is because I said, well, who's listening to McCarthy?
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, some of this, anytime that I think that we see Kevin McCarthy talking about Mike Johnson, there is some jealousy and anger there, right?
Well,
Yeah, just a little bit. Because Mike Johnson has a completely different relationship with the folks, the Republican folks.
He has a relationship.
He has his finger on the
and
pulse
McCarthy
of this
did not.
caucus
And
in
that
a
is,
way McCarthy did.
And that was the
Agreed.
difference, is that McCarthy, the people that hated McCarthy hated him for personal reasons and myriad reasons. It was all over the place. And you know, one of the things that I think is really interesting, though, is that the resignations that could be coming, everyone's like warning about these resignations, but at the end of the day, they're less about Johnson and all about Trump, right, Conway? Like, there doesn't seem to be, like, people aren't leaving because they're just, like, so upset with Mike Johnson. They're leaving because of Trump.
This is sort of a different but extended version of things we saw during Trump 1, where all the decent representatives, the ones who really weren't Trumpy, started just dropping like flies and leaving because they couldn't deal with having to face a general electorate and having to make promises to a crazy base. And now you're seeing, you know, a lot of these same fissures have always been there. The fissure, the fact that you have Trump doing his best to help his rich buddies, whereas the people, the working class people who are basically tricked into voting for Trump, you know, are tricked into thinking that he's working for them when he clearly is not and he couldn't give a damn about them. And now you have the fissure is getting worse in a sense, is that the margin is moving. You have people who have been MAGA who are in districts where the base is just whittling down to its hardcore base. So they're even more rabid than before. And then the rest of the electorate is completely pissed off at Trump, including some Trump voters. And so they're in between this rock and a hard place caused by Trump.
Because no matter how MAGA someone is, they care more about their money and what they're spending and the prices, right? That is what Joe Biden learned a little bit too late, is that you cannot trick people into thinking eggs are a different price than what they see when they go to the grocery store.
And Trump is like, okay, what's Trump doing? He's fussing with his huge ballroom with his architects. He's getting a 747 from the Qataris. Oh, U-747. Okay, U-747 for the Qataris. Yes.
So I do want to argue with the premise of your question a little bit, which is you said this is not about Mike Johnson, this is about Trump. But I do think at this point in time, they're essentially the same people. I mean, I always think back to that Wall Street Journal quote where Steve Bannon says that Congress is basically the Duma.
And Trump told lawmakers or told someone behind closed doors that
I'm the speaker.
He was the speaker.
Right. And if Mike Johnson was like previous iterations of speakers, I'll even give Kevin McCarthy just a little bit of credit here, but someone like Paul Ryan, who represented the actual interests of the House, understood how the Office of Legislative Affairs worked, tried to implement more of a process instead of letting himself be a pawn, things might be a little different now. We wouldn't see, I think, this rush to just leave Congress, or at least this reaction to the polling to now completely distance themselves and become completely exasperated with the institution.
If I may pull that thread, this is the one moment this fall that stuck out to me with Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation announcement. I heard the tones of America first. So if there's going to be really any split, that's where they're looking. Because don't forget, America first screams follow the money. They used to be conspiracy theorists. They still are, a lot of them. And they're saying, where is our money going? Abroad, at home. They are calling it out at every level. So I'm just saying, don't think this is an actual divorce within the Republican Party, but you're seeing this new sort of energy. And with Marjorie saying she's leaving, there will be a couple people who pull that. Again, Thomas Massie will be one of them, but it may start to get into the psyche of Johnson and other leaders in the House GOP conference, because they really feel that, hey, to hold on to these people and to deal in places where Democrats are closing the gap with Republicans. And don't forget, Democrats are actually running some really good candidates this year. I'm already seeing them emerge in places where I would not have guessed. And so the one thing I will remind viewers, though, Republicans always fall in line real well.
Yeah.
Despite what I just said, look for that to be that common piece.